We've moved about 10 miles now from Three Chimneys Farm to the famous Calumet Farm, home of many champions. We've come here to see Affirmed, the 11th Triple Crown champion. But the horse being led out right now is Alydar. Never won the Triple Crown, but he's the only horse ever to have finished second in the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont, and he certainly belongs in our story because most people think that he would have been a Triple Crown champion had it not been for that one other horse, Affirmed. And there he is. It's appropriate that Affirmed and Alydar should be in adjacent stalls here at Calumet Farm, as they are, because they certainly were always close together on the racetrack. The margins in the Classics were 1.5 lengths in the Derby, a neck in the Preakness, and a head in the Belmont. You don't get any closer than that. In his first stakes race, the youthful at Belmont in June, Affirmed was a winner. It was hardly noticed that another colt, Alydar, finished 5th that day. There was much more to come. Alydar beat Affirmed in the Great American, but Affirmed came back to take the hopeful at Saratoga in August. They next met in the Futurity at Belmont in September. The rivalry was in full flower now. The two colts battled it out all the way. Each had the lead in the stretch at one point, and when they came to the wire, it was anyone's guess. The photo showed that it was Affirmed. They were back at the beautiful Belmont plant for the Champagne on October 15th. It was the first time they had run as far as a mile, and Affirmed was a very slight favorite, but this time it would be Alydar storming from the outside in the final 16th who would win the day. They would meet once more that year. Steve Cawthon, the sensational teenager, was Affirmed's regular rider now. The Laurel Futurity was another classic. Alydar the favorite this time, but Affirmed charging on the outside, winning the 2-year-old championship for the Wolfsons. Their next meeting wouldn't happen until the Kentucky Derby of 1978. They started their 3-year-old campaigns a continent apart. Affirmed was in California at Santa Anita. He won a sprint and the San Felipe Handicap, then prepared for the Santa Anita Derby. Cawthon had been set down for a riding infraction, so Lafitte Pinkai was at the reins in this race to establish the West Coast Challenger for Kentucky. As was his habit, he took the lead from the start. It was an easy race for the son of exclusive native. Pinkai gave him the whip through the stretch, though, to keep his mind on his business. He won it by 8 lengths. Meanwhile, Alydar had spent the winter in Florida at the magnificent old Hialeah course with trainer John Veach, who couldn't wait for his colt to get revenge on the West Coast star trained by Las Barrera. Alydar was carefully prepared for the Flamingo Stakes, and he didn't disappoint. Alydar ran away from his field as Affirmed did in California. The build-up to the Derby was the most dramatic in years, with not one favorite now, but 2. On the way to Louisville, Alydar won the Bluegrass at Keeneland by 13 lengths. The usual immense crowd was there, including Affirmed's owners. Affirmed was well placed throughout the race, 2nd at the quarter, 3rd at the half, and 6 furlong marks. Alydar started slowly, but still 8th of the 11 starters at 3/4 of a mile. But sensitive Prince took the early lead and set a tremendous early pace, but neither Affirmed or Alydar were biting. Affirmed moved up on the turn, but Alydar this time waited too long to make his bid. Believe It took the lead briefly, but Affirmed took over in the stretch. Dave Johnson called the finish.
Travers, whence they come. Affirmed on the inside, takes command again. Believe It is second. Alydar gains ground third. They're in the final furlong. It's Affirmed with Stevie Cawthon showing the way by 2.5. Believe It with Ed Mayfield next on the outside. Alydar is third, but it's going to be Affirmed. Affirmed with Steve Cawthon is going to win this 104th running of the Kentucky Derby. Alydar is second. Believe It third.
And so the first big one of the big 3 was chalked up for Affirmed. Afterward, I asked Cawthon for his reaction. It was the week of the kid's 18th birthday.
It's a tremendous feeling. I didn't realize how good it feels until after the race, but it's something else.
Affirmed had the upper hand for sure as they arrived in Baltimore for the Preakness. The colts were so closely matched, but it was beginning to look like Affirmed had the extra edge every time now. The Wolfsons were there to see Affirmed, but Alydar's owners, Lucille and Admiral Gene Markey, were wheelchair-bound at their Calumet Farm home watching on television. Affirmed let the long-shot Track Reward lead briefly, but then took over and led after a half mile. Alydar was closer this time, about 5 lengths off the lead and then moving up, well placed for his stretch drive. That's Alydar in the devil red silks on the outside, moving up. The crowd sensed what was coming, and it was just what they had hoped for. Affirmed and Alydar. Those two on the front. Flying down the stretch now, writing the story of racing's greatest rivalry with their footprints. stride for stride, nearly head for head. And at the end, it was affirmed again by a neck. Could they do it yet again in the Belmont? There seemed no reason not to. There were 3 other horses in the race, but they were merely spear carriers on this day, extras to serve as background for the stars. Caught them. John Beach had a new set of tactics for this race. He wouldn't let Affirmed get away to loaf on the lead, then pour it on in the stretch. This time, jockey George Velasquez would push the colt in the pink silk all the way, make him work for every inch. And at the end, well, who knows? Now he moved right up with Affirmed. It appeared that one of them had to give as Affirmed stamped up the tempo. Alydar was right with him, though, and the crowd was so loud that it was difficult to hear the call as they raced in front of the stands.
The 2 are heads apart, and Alydar's got a lead. Alydar put ahead in front, right in the middle of the stretch. It's Alydar and Affirmed battling back along the inside. We'll test these 2 to the wire. Affirmed under a left-hand whip. Alydar on the outside driving. Affirmed and Alydar heads apart. Affirmed's got a nose in front as they come onto the wire.
And Affirmed had won the Triple Crown by a total margin of less than 2 lengths. Alydar had become the first horse in history to finish second in all 3 of the classes. In any other year, Alydar almost certainly would have won the Triple Crown himself. These were tired horses now, but after a rest, another meeting was still to come. It was in the Travers at Saratoga, the summertime derby, they call it in upstate New York. 50,000 people poured into the spa for the great day, wondering if the 2 colts could put on yet another fine show. In the early going, they got their money's worth. Alydar had learned now that he couldn't let Affirmed have his way, that he had to push him as he had done in the Belmont. As you will see, nearing the far turn, Alydar tried to pass his rival on the inside for the first time, but the hole wasn't there, and Velasquez had to pull him up. An inquiry or objection was inevitable. Affirmed went on to finish first, and Alydar remarkably got back into the fray and took second. That was important because when Affirmed was disqualified, and there was the moment again, Alydar was moved ahead of him into first place. It was an inconclusive end to their great rivalry. But it was the last time they would ever meet. Despite defeats later in the season by Seattle Slew, Affirmed was named Horse of the Year. The next spring, Hollywood Park. After a couple of defeats, he went on another winning streak with his new jockey, Lafitte Pinkai. He had replaced Cawthon, who was in an extended slump. The race coming up was the Hollywood Gold Cup. He was carrying 132 pounds, the most in his career.
Now it's Affirmed in front by half-length. Sirlad is second and takes. Affirmed drawing out. Affirmed and Sirlad and takes. And Affirmed is the winner by half-length. Sirlad second.
He had carried that tremendous weight, 132 pounds, a mile and a quarter in a sensational 158 2/5. So Affirmed continued on his majestic way. With this victory, he passed Kelso as the all-time leading money winner and became the first horse to win more than $2 million in his career. Later, he traveled east, there to meet a new challenger. It was Spectacular Bid, winner of the 1979 Derby and Preakness. As with Pinkai, he had a new rider, the great Bill Shoemaker, replacing young Ronnie Franklin. They were set for the start. And of course, Affirmed took the lead immediately. As you will see in the stretch, both Spectacular Bid and Belmont winner Coastal took their shots. That Spectacular Bid between horses, Coastal on the rail. But Affirmed, once again, was the winner and again would be Horse of the Year. One final touch was left. At Aqueduct later, he was paraded before the crowd one last time and then retired. He stood as a stallion first at Spendthrift Farm, then was moved to Calumet. There he joined his old rival Alydar in the stud barn. And now there would be a new rivalry. Which horse would be the better sire? Only time will tell for sure. This is where all Triple Crown stories end, at Belmont Park in New York, scene of the Belmont Stakes. 22 horses have come to the Belmont with a chance to win the Triple Crown.